Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, Tyus Jones headed to the Valley. The Suns got their point guard again. Why it was a no-brainer move that they absolutely had to do, and how it sets them up to be the type of team they want to be now and in the future. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host, as well as a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons. Welcome in. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen after the Tyus Jones signing has become official. Hit follow or subscribe if you have not already. We're free and available here for you every single day, Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer. Get locked on to the Phoenix Suns all offseason long and beyond. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA when you do to get $20 off your first purchase. We're going to hit the Jones signing, how it happened, my biggest reactions, what it means for the rest of the roster, and the future, all on today's show. But I got to tell you, I got this wrong. That's where we're going to start. This is a no-brainer signing. When a player this talented wants to be here on a minimum contract, you do what you need to do to make that happen. Even if other plans might have felt like this thing was headed in a different direction, or you kind of have some players who overlap with him, he's too good to say no to. It also gives them the flexibility to continue to shape this thing closer to what they want it to be. But the reason that I'm wrong is because I did an episode earlier this week where I went through and I said, is there anybody on the market that the Suns could get that would be worth cutting a player already on their roster for? And the guy that I focused first and foremost on was David Roddy as the cuttee in that situation. And I said no. I said there's nobody, because I frankly just did not think that the combination of a small salary and a small role was going to be enough to convince anybody. And if you were down to a lower tier of player that might take a minimum and might take a smaller role, well, it's just not worth eating the contract and cutting Roddy and going through all of that to get somebody who's a question mark. Tyus Jones is not a question mark. Tyus Jones was somebody I mentioned on that podcast. But I said, hey, even the Wizards, which is obviously his team last year, they are good enough where, they're good enough where it's not a terrible opportunity for him. And they have the financial flexibility where they can pay him more than a minimum to keep him as their starting center. And then maybe he hits free agency again next year or something like that. But I just didn't see why he would want to leave that possibility. Turns out he had offers from Atlanta and Memphis and maybe Washington, according to John Gambadoro of Arizona Sports, but he chose to come here. And the reason that he chose to come here is because the role is not, in fact, small for him. And in a statement that he released by way of his agency, and then Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted it when he broke the news of the deal, he's going to be the starting point guard here. So after a year plus, all the way back to when Chris Paul got traded for Bradley Beal in June of 2023, where we have all been debating and arguing about whether, in fact, the Suns needed a starting point guard, whether it made sense, whether they could find one, they've done it. They now have one, and he is Tyus Jones. So I'm wrong that the Suns weren't going to be able to make an offer that was appealing enough to go get a player like that. And Roddy was, in fact, cut, although he was really traded to Atlanta, not cut directly, and now they will cut E.J. Liddell. If you can get an E.J. Liddell Suns jersey, though, I recommend doing it. They traded Roddy to Atlanta for this guy, Liddell, on Friday. He makes less money, so the cap hit of cutting him outright is a little bit cheaper than doing that with Roddy. And then also you clear that roster spot when you do cut Liddell and now have that space to go out and sign Tyus Jones. So, they made a pitch. Tyus Jones sees this, as he said, not only as a starting role and a good opportunity to be a big part of a contending team, but also he made no bones about it, right? He is hoping to hit free agency once again next summer. So it makes sense from both sides. This was if you look at Atlanta, where he would be backing up Trae Young on a team that's not going to be that good, or Memphis, where he would go back, where he just spent 4 years previous to this past season. He's going to be backing up John Morant again, and he got out of that situation. I mean, he got traded, but he wanted to prove he could be a starter, and on that team, he's going to be playing minimal minutes and not giving himself a good opportunity to really prove himself. So it's a win-win. He starts here. He makes a little less money. He gives himself a 1-year prove-it opportunity where he ideally can go back to the market next summer and make more. And the Suns get a player better than probably they ever thought they could, given that they were constrained because of the second apron to a minimum deal. So I was wrong that it wouldn't work out and make sense on both sides. It does, it will, and they got a very good player. So you absolutely have to do this signing once the opportunity materializes. This is their Gary Trent contract, right? I mean, I know a lot of Suns fans were kind of like, damn, how did the Bucks go out and get 3 guys, frankly, who might have had an opportunity to make more than the minimum? And then, especially Gary Trent last week, DeLon Wright, and who's the other one? Taurean Prince before that. Gary Trent last week. What's going on? Why can't the Suns get their guy like that? They got Eric Gordon last year. That was kind of a good example. Well, they just did it, right? You wait long enough. As long as you're willing as a front office and a coaching staff to be amenable to good players who want to come, which clearly the Suns were, I don't think that they necessarily entered this offseason thinking that they were going to acquire a starting caliber point guard. But obviously, as the market for Jones on good teams with big roles sort of dissipated, his camp spoke with the Suns and said, hey, would you be open to what kind of role would our guy have here? And the Suns were flexible on that, and they're rewarded for it. So they get their Gary Trent the same way that the Bucks said, yeah, he'll start here. He's played with Dame. Let's make this happen. Now the Suns get their version of that. It may not be perfect. It may not be even your favorite of all of the possible players that they could have gotten to accept the discount and everything else. But when an opportunity like this comes open at a position of need, and just frankly more talent, which is also a need for the Suns, you say yes. And they said yes. They made it happen. And their offseason looks a whole lot better as a result. Let's talk about, though, this was a surprise. They already signed a player who might be the dude in the whole NBA most similar to Tyus Jones in the form of Monte Morris. And locked in a couple other playmaking types of guys at other positions. So how does Tyus fit with this team on the court and on the cap sheet? Coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the Gametime app, the best place to buy any ticket, whether that is a sport like MLB, concerts, comedy, theater, anything you need. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. They also have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee, taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. As mentioned, deals galore. If you wait, you go last minute, there's a deal. Flash deals on certain sections and areas and events. Zone deals where you say, I want to sit there, give me a deal on that. lowest price guarantee, where if you find a ticket cheaper on another platform, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. But my favorite thing, as it always has been, the transparency up front, all-in pricing, as well as seat views in the app. A panoramic view that you can turn around and scroll and zoom out straight from the platform. So you click in, you see the price, you see the spot, you see the event, and you say yes. But what is my view going to be? Especially if it's a venue you haven't been to before, you want to feel comfortable that you're not going to get screwed, or you're going to be squinting, or you're going to be peering around this or that, or somebody's head. Gametime takes care of that as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets from the MLB to beyond with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And we're back. Let's keep it rolling here. Tyus Jones to the Suns. What is the fit with everybody else that they've acquired over the past 6 months? Again, Tyus, according to Gambo, is going to be stepping into the starting lineup in place of Grayson Allen. And let's start there before we get to some of the other bench players and the rotation and all sorts of questions, as really just the first look at what this team is going to look like on the court. Bradley Beal is not coming off the bench. Bradley Beal is not going to be coming off the bench. I had Gabe Guerrero, who does great work on the Suns Valley YouTube channel, multiple times on the podcast in the past few months, and he made the case to me and to you for why this could make sense. And here's the deal. I don't, in a vacuum, disagree. It's not like I cannot see why it could make sense for Beal to come off of the bench, okay? Especially now that Jones is here, because one thing Jones does on the court with this team is he makes them a lot smaller, and that has been the argument that I've made every single step of the way, against acquiring a major point guard to add to this group. I even said it when Monte Morris came around. Hey, he's not going to start. He shouldn't start because it's just not worth jeopardizing your size, your rebounding, your defense, all things that the Suns already were at a disadvantage with. You don't want to exacerbate that weakness, right? And honestly, just like kind of pure athleticism and force, which really was on display in the Minnesota series. So yes, of course I can see that if Jones is going to start, and of course Book and Durant are going to start, you'd like a three, and as close to a traditional three-man as a real wing as you can possibly find. Somebody on this roster, as it currently stands, somebody like Royce O'Neal. I thought Royce O'Neal should have started over Grayson before this Tyus Jones signing happened, so I can totally see why you would still want to have that happen if you are a Suns fan out there. But the list of people as accomplished as Bradley Beal is, All-NBA, All-Star, multiple trips to the postseason as a number one or number two guy, to accept or embrace a bench role, that list is one player long, and it is Manu Ginobili. And he is in the Hall. I think he's in the Hall of Fame. If not, he will be, in large part because of that, right? Because he sacrificed for the greater good of the team and was able to push his way to 2 more championships after doing so with the San Antonio Spurs. And the whole lore and legend of all of that team's maneuvering is that Manu was the driving force behind making that possible. The only way that Bradley Beal would ever come off of the bench and prove me wrong and make me look like a fool for denying it so much is if he actively wanted it. And even then, I'm not sure it's best for the team, but at that point, you got to explore it. He's just too good. And here's the thing. Adding a point guard should help him be even better just as much as it helps anybody else, right? In the same way that you could make the case that Book, from a pace standpoint, a shot selection standpoint, a turnover standpoint, was out of sorts when the ball was in his hands last season, and Durant, just from an physical effort and where and how he's being used as a scorer standpoint was not maximized. You could say the same exact thing about Beal, right? That Beal, as somebody who's coming off of screens, who's cutting, who's attacking, rotating defenses rather than set defenses. All of those things will make Beal better too. So the Suns are making this move with the idea that Tyus Jones is going to help their big three, their whole team, get organized, play faster. The past 5 seasons, whether Jones was in a bench kind of 6-man role or a starting role last year in Washington, his teams have been in the top 10 in offensive seconds per possession or offensive pace every single year the past 5 years. That's why you get Tyus Jones, and it's going to help Beal, not force Beal to sacrifice more or do less, right? So that's the biggest thing. You're bringing, and it's not just Beal, right? I mean, I just said with Book and Durant how they struggled to adapt to having more offensive creation and initiation responsibility last year. The whole point of getting a point guard is to help make those guys even better. Let's also talk about, though, the other additions that the Suns have made, right? So playmaking around the big three has been a focus. I think you could make the case on just about every acquisition that the Suns have made since they got the big three. Maybe not last year's minimum contracts, but let's say since then, right? At the deadline, what do they go out and do? They get Royce O'Neal, who, yes, is, a decent on-ball defender, a good off-ball defender, can shoot it a little bit, can, handle a little bit. But one of the best things about Royce O'Neal is his offensive IQ and ball movement. This summer, they go out and get Mason Plumlee, who is just a clone, as close to a clone as you can get of Yusuf Nurkic. Both of them in dribble handoff, in short roll passing, in post playmaking. One of their best attributes is their passing and ability to read the floor. And then Monte Morris, who, as I said in that first segment, is as close to a 1-to-1 identical twin of Tyus Jones as it possibly gets, right? They're both known for being assist-to-turnover ratio gods. And now the Suns have both of them. So is that a good thing or a bad thing that there's so much overlap between what the Suns have acquired? I mean, time will tell if Monte, how he feels about all of this. I'm sure there was a little part of him and his agent that probably thought, hey, maybe we're not going to go into training camp as a guaranteed starter, but we know this team needs some playmaking. We watched those fourth quarters last year. Maybe, just maybe, if I'm Monte Morris, I might sneak into that starting lineup or closing lineup before long here. Well, that's not going to happen now with Tyus Jones, right? Tyus Jones went out and had himself last year the best season of his career. He pushed his way out of Memphis a little bit, moved over in the Marcus Smart, Kristaps Porzingis 3-way deal, shot 41% from 3, 54% from 2, averaged the most, assists and turnovers per game, obviously had more minutes, but even if you look at it from a per 36 metric, his scoring was maybe in line with the past 2 years before that, but his assists definitely went up. His 2-point attempts were up from the previous year. Everything was just reminiscent of a guy who took on more. He had the most efficient season of his career, and his defense held up pretty steady, even on a bad team. So he just, to me, especially given that he has trended upward as he's now 27 going on 28, and Monte Morris has had a rough patch in his career, Tyus is ahead of him. Aside from that, it is an open question how these other secondary playmakers will be utilized. In the same way, we're kind of curious about, even if we all agree it could and will probably help stabilize and give structure to the big three, what is the domino effect for when Tyus Jones is on the court with Royce O'Neal? What does that change about how Royce is used? Frankly, Grayson Allen. The centers. There's never such a thing as too many high IQ players who can make the right decision with the ball in their hands. I mean, the 2021 Suns team that went to the finals, between, obviously Chris Paul being the head of the snake there, but at the same time you had Jay Crowder who could make the right decision, make the right read. You had bench players like Cam Johnson, and then obviously some role players like Mikal Bridges and, before Frank Kaminsky, Aaron Baines, all these guys that came through. That was a hallmark of what the Suns wanted to be on the everywhere on the roster. So it's not like it's going to be a problem, but it will change the role and the rotation. And I think the number one thing is that it will help the big three be put into position to succeed, especially to start games and get off to good starts and probably close a lot of games. And then it will create that for 48 minutes now that you do have Monte Morris. But everything else feels very up in the air. This team is smaller than it was even last year. Now with two small point guards added to the rotation. And frankly, the spontaneous, three-headed monster, unpredictable offense that the Suns talked up so much last year, it's not going to be featured as much with Book, Beal, and Durant out there with wings and bigs around them. There's going to be very few minutes when this team is healthy where that is what they roll out. So it's not an exaggeration to say almost everything about how this team played and looked will be different. But I think that's by design. I think that they want to see how it all looks and use the newfound flexibility that they generated this offseason to then make moves to get ready for April and May. So we'll break down how this move puts them in position to do that coming up after one more quick break. All right, let's close out the show. The Phoenix Suns just capped off with the Tyus Jones signing a flexibility-first offseason. Okay, we went in thinking this was going to be another transaction cycle for Matt Ishbia from the 2023 deadline to the 2023 summer, 2024 deadline. It was all in, big move. The most we can give up, the most we can get back every step of the way. We thought this was going to be the fourth chapter of that story. Instead, this was a flexibility-first offseason. The Suns understood. We made the KD trade, not knowing exactly what the CBA was going to look like, right? Then they notoriously, Brian Windhorst wrote the story in the summer of 2023 when they made the Beal trade, blowing through the second apron. That was the name of the game, right? So we don't know what the CBA is going to look like. Then we're blowing through the rules of that CBA. Then in 2024, it was like, make the most of the season at the deadline. And now, flexibility first. And how did they accomplish flexibility first? Well, they couldn't spend more money than the minimum on the free agent market. They couldn't make that many trades because Grayson Allen was not eligible to be traded because of his extension. Yusuf Nurkic clearly did not have that much value. Royce O'Neal was a free agent, and they didn't have any other big salaries to give up outside of Nasir Little, who couldn't even crack the rotation of a team desperate for wings last year. So they turned the 22nd pick into 2 players and 2 second-round picks. Very, very good manipulating of their draft position. Got Ryan Dunn, got Oso Ighodaro. In free agency, they got 2 players at positions of need in Morris and Plumlee. Then they overbid for Josh Okogie. They locked in what you could call it an overbid, but a reasonable contract that is going to be tradable for Royce O'Neal. Brought back guys like Lee and Bowl on basically minimums to round out the rotation, and now get Tyus Jones on an incredible value deal. So that created flexibility that they did not have. What that flexibility allows them to do now, and where you have to look, is Jusuf Nurkic and Grayson Allen. Both of them, by way of everything that happened this summer, but especially acquiring the level of player of a Tyus Jones on top of all of that, it makes them, for different reasons, but it makes them both expendable, okay? It makes Grayson expendable because you are now acquiring another small guard, and there just is not going to be minutes for all of them, considering you also want to build out real competitive lineups with other players who are maybe bigger at the same time, right? You can't play 4 of them at the same time. It's a stretch to even play 3, depending on the matchup. So, you have Jones, Beal, Book starting. Well, now you have Morris and Allen already locked into needing to come off the bench, in addition to O'Neal and Bowl and Plumlee, and then where the rookie's coming in. And oh, by the way, it might be nice to have Damian Lee shooting out there at times, and you just gave Josh Okogie $8 million. Probably should play him and have him defend some guards and wings that are giving you trouble. So that's why Allen is expendable. He also has a contract now in the mid-teens salary-wise that's very tradable and could get you something real back because he's a good player on top of having a deal that you can move. And Jusuf Nurkic is expendable. He always was. I mean, the Suns, I thought, very likely could have traded him this summer, but the market did not agree with me. But he's even more expendable now, I guess is a good way to put it, because of the lack of need for his playmaking. I mean, our podcast on Friday, Stephen Perjone Garner and I, talking about Nurkic a little bit, became very outdated very quickly. Frankly, even the book section did. But Nurk's, one of the things that is most valuable about him, besides him being really big, being a good screener, post defender, in simplified situations, rim protector. But one of the best things about him is his ability to make reads and be a playmaking hub as a big man. You can create not only just pure make the pass to the open man type of stuff, but you also can kind of manufacture some spacing even if he's not taking threes, because he can be out on the perimeter setting guys up and pulling his defender out and then passing from there. That's valuable. But because he is not the best finisher, not the best athlete, not the best three-point shooter, you almost need to use Nurkic as a playmaker in order to get the most out of him. But now he's on a team that suddenly has a whole bunch of playmaking everywhere. So the thing that he's best at, that you kind of have to do when he's out there, is less valuable, meaning he's less valuable. Not to mention, Plumlee is very similar to him, as is Oso Ighodaro, another player who I didn't even mention in the whole playmaking rant that I did there, but another player they drafted this summer, who one of the best things about him is his playmaking. So you're now in this position where you need that from Nurkic less, and it frees you up to use his contract and a pick or whatever it takes to flip him into anything you want, really. Because now you have a little bit more center depth with Plumlee and Ighodaro manning that spot, as well as Bowl and even Durant potentially in a pinch as options there, where you could turn Nurkic into a wing, into a forward, into whatever you really can get, and have that work out for you. Because you have depth everywhere, you're not as susceptible to, well, if we trade Nurkic for a forward, Now we have a big hole at center, and we're back to square one in terms of feeling a little bit thin. So, everything this summer was about manufacturing flexibility that the league and the CBA tried to eliminate. They have tradable contracts. They have the 2031 first-round pick, a few second-round picks, young players, everything. Now with Allen and O'Neal, they have actual good players who are properly priced that they can trade rather than Nurkic, who I think the league clearly sees as a little overpriced. And they can use this regular season to evaluate everything and then move how they think they need to. So, I see the rotation right now as Jones, Beal, Booker, Durant, Nurkic, with Morris, Allen, O'Neal, Bol, Plumlee, or something, with Okogie, Dunn, Iguodaro, Lee, kind of potentially there to compete for minutes and burst into that group. But if it becomes clear, if I'm James Jones thinking, watching the first 2 months of the season, we're too small, we got to do something about it. Well, then I can go do that, right? It doesn't need to happen now. I know a lot of people are like, what's the next domino? What does this mean? It very well could mean that Allen or Nurkic or both get traded. But that doesn't have to happen now. This team is deep. This team has options. This team is going to be versatile. If they do get hit with the injury bug, they'll be more able to prepare for that. They can match up with different teams in different ways, in a way that they could not last year when it was a bunch of young guys who weren't playing very well and overburdened so early in the season. So I think in addition to manufacturing flexibility, the Suns also just can now afford to be patient, right? Maybe there was a Nurk deal that got discussed this summer, and it was like a C+ trade, and the Suns just couldn't convince themselves to pull the trigger because it was just going to make them worse. Let's just put it how it probably was. Now they can hold out for a Nurkic trade. Now basically also going into one less year on his contract and all that, or Allen being available. They can be patient, let the market develop, and not be so desperate, and take a B+ trade if it comes up, and continue to make their team better. They're deep. They have options. They can be patient. They won 49 games and were damn close to top 10 in offense and defense last year, despite a season from hell from an injury standpoint and a coaching situation that never clicked. It's very easy to be negative about this team. I'll tell you, I am much more excited for the regular season now than I was when the summer started, and even before this Tyus deal. It just has created so much intrigue and so many layers to all of the things that are going to be playing out this fall, this season, that I wasn't expecting would ever be possible. And that's just very cool. And it's going to be a more fun team to watch, to think about, to follow the transactions of, all because that flexibility first mindset paid off. That'll wrap us up. More tomorrow with Brandon Duenas. We will react to the USA versus Serbia opener of the Paris Olympics on Sunday morning at 8:15. I don't know how many of you are going to set your alarms to wake up for that, but Brandon and I for sure will, and we'll have our thoughts fully for you as soon as that buzzer sounds from Paris. Enjoy your Saturday. Enjoy your Sunday. We'll be back at you then. Talk to you tomorrow.